Hello, I'm Gary Stearman. Thanks for joining us for another discussion of Christian topics, prophetic and otherwise. With me in studio today is author and lecturer L.A. Marzulli. L.A., welcome to Prophecy
Great
Watchers.
to be here, Gary. Thanks for having me back on.
You know, usually I do these commentaries and updates just standing alone. It's nice to have a sit down and talk with somebody else conversation. On the other hand, the subject that we're going to be talking about today is rather grim, rather gruesome, and in keeping with a lot of the work that you've been doing lately. And we're talking about the Oregon gunman who walked into a school and started shooting people, but not just anybody. He went in there asking questions. He asked the students, "Are you a Christian? Please stand up," at which point he would shoot them. The others who said that they weren't Christians, he shot in the legs. Now, who's to figure this out? But of course, the whole nation is talking about this today as we're making this update. You've been working for some time on the ideas that surround phenomena such as these, and you've written a book recently called, or that has the title, Chaos. You know, it focuses on the idea of chaotic events. Talk about this for a minute from your perspective.
Well, you know, what we're seeing is, in my opinion, the manifestation of the days of chaos. We're seeing more shooters. You know, you go back 20 or 30 years ago, these events weren't happening like they are today. The fact that some crazed lone gunman shows up at a school and begins to target, as you said, Christians. I mean, specifically going after those people who are Christians and then saying, well, good, you'll see God in about a second, and then blowing them away. I mean, it's absolutely beyond the pale. It's unthinkable. And it also begs the question, how did this guy, this man Mercer, how does he cross that line? You know, people say, well, he's insane. No, he's not insane. He's not, you know, like a maniac. He's in control of what he's doing. He's driving to the site. He's armed himself. He knows, he carries out everything with a methodology which shows planning and foresight. He's not insane. That there's a power that is driving him, pushing him, in my opinion, and that, of course, is the supernatural world of the demonic. And he's over a period of years has been groomed for that day, and yesterday was his, you know, grisly graduation, if I can use those terms.
Yeah, and probably it wasn't a coincidence that he did it on that particular day, because I believe he was being driven by an unseen power, a dark power. L.A., one of the things that has just stood out like a sore thumb, as far as I'm concerned, is the lack of public sentiment and sympathy for Christians under attack. Here's a school, and there's a creative writing class. He walks in, any of you here Christians, stand up, you know, and then he shot him. At the very least, this should point to a gap about a mile wide in our thinking, because if this happened to other groups, favored groups in our society, there would be expressions of outrage, there would be expressions of sympathy, there would be people with teddy bears and flowers and all kinds of things, you know, that people do as expressions of sympathy, and even the executive branch might order the flags to be flown at half-staff, might extend sympathy to Christians. I don't see much sympathy.
There's hardly any, and it's sort of telling that Ahmed Mohammed can build, which is just taking the innards of one clock and sticking it in the briefcase, and this becomes national news several weeks ago. And our president, you know, cool clock, Ahmed, you know, why not come to the White House? Basically invites this kid to the White House. But we don't see Obama, instead of reaching out and realizing that Christians were singled out, he uses the whole opportunity for gun control, which is, you know, think about it, Gary. If there were people that were packing, if there were security guards that were armed, the situation might not have escalated to what it later became. But the security guard was not armed. They deliberately voted not to arm a security guard, which is crazy. What's he going to do? You know, tell the guy to please stop shooting? I mean, it's ludicrous. It's just ludicrous. And the people, you know, some of this falls on those who are legislating and doing the laws in Oregon. And some of the blame, unfortunately, falls on the university itself and the people that voted not to arm the security guard. I mean, what are they thinking? Look at where we are. In these days of chaos, which random shooters popping up, and you never know when they're going to show up. And then you've got the whole jihad element, which may tie into this shooter. We don't know yet.
We don't know yet, but they're looking into that.
They're looking into it.
Yeah. In short, and the title of your new book,
Days of Chaos.
Days of Chaos, is just so appropriate. What can I say? There is a raging insanity, which takes me to something I've spoken of many times, and many of you will have heard me say this before, but it's appropriate today. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, this know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. And then Paul goes into this long list of personality disorders. Men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, and the list goes on and on and on, as you know. In other words, a degeneration of societal stability, topped by this word, perilous times. And many years ago, I was studying this, and it just blew me away. This word translated perilous is the Greek word chalipos, which means ragingly insane. And the only other place in the New Testament you find this is in Matthew 8:28, speaking of Jesus crossing the Sea of Galilee and arriving at the other side over on the shore near what we would call the Golan Heights today. And when he was come to the other side of the country of the Gergesenes, there met him two possessed with devils coming out of the tombs, exceeding fierce, so that no man might pass by that way. And of course, we've all read this, and we know about the strength of the demon-possessed man, and all of those things have been dramatized. But the term exceeding fierce is the same term that Paul used when he wrote to Timothy. It's chalipos, ragingly insane. And I find that just amazing, that raging insanity will be the characteristic of the last days. What else do you need to say? If you can watch television, if you can read the papers, you see raging insanity, in my opinion.
And I certainly concur with that. You know, we talked about the shooter in Oregon, but what we see happening in the Middle East with ISIS and the beheading of children and women and of course Christians, where Islamists, once they become the dominant force in an area, I mean, the first thing that they do is and we've seen this in ISIS, they'll just round up the Christians and just massacre them. And then after they massacre them, they'll tie the dead bodies to crosses. I mean, this is in-your-face war against Christians. And it makes you wonder. It's going back into the book of Revelation where it talks about those who were beheaded. And it just, you know, I remember reading that 35 years ago, whatever, for the first time, wondering, well, no one does that anymore. How's that going to work? And yet here we are in 2015 where we see exactly that, which called out with great specificity in the book of Revelation. We see the beheading of innocent Christian men and women.
Well, you go back to the 30s and the rise of Nazism. And we all have read about Nazi atrocities, unspeakable atrocity. I mean, when I say unspeakable, I mean unspeakable atrocities against even women and children and totally innocent people used in medical experimentations. And you say to yourself, how could you do this? How insane do you have to be to do those sorts of things? And the answer is, in a way, it's not insanity so much as it is possession. You have to be possessed by a very dark, evil spirit. And so what Paul is saying to Timothy, what we see in the days when Jesus walked the earth, is the effect of, I think, a demonic drive when people are possessed of dark, evil spirits. And it's not popular to talk about that today because we've taken a psychiatric model to explain these things. But the biblical model makes a whole lot more sense to me.
And I agree. I think that the list of shooters that we've seen, for instance, the so-called Batman shooter who's now serving multiple life terms and everything. What's interesting is when you see photographs of him in the courtroom, and from my understanding of what happened, even in the jail cell, he wakes up and he kind of goes, well, what am I doing in here? There seems to be some sort of a psychotic break between his actions in the movie theater, and then later on, you don't see that crazed look in his face again, during the trial. It only happens around the time of the event. It makes you wonder, was he programmed, like some people like Russ Dizdar would say? Is he MK Ultra? Is he a super soldier? Or did he just have a psychotic break? I mean, and we don't know, because all the information, and I realize this sounds a little conspiratorial, but the information is always controlled. Like this gunman in Oregon, we know that he's got 4 guns, seemingly because of the reports, but we really don't know too much about him, other than these little tidbits from Facebook and different profiles. Was he radicalized? We don't know. Was he a neo-Nazi? No idea. Not yet, anyway.
Just possessed, at the very least, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Possessed.
I agree.
And it is not fashionable to say that in the modern era. In fact, as you and I have grown up, in our generation, the model, the psychologists, and school psychologists and counselors and secular counseling, and all kinds of secular books claim to have the answer to personality disorders of various kinds, and the whole idea of the demonic, a dark force behind the scenes, has been laughed at rather consistently. Sure. But quite frankly, I think we're seeing it just pop out. Things have reached a stage now where it's hard to deny that there is some dark force. Principalities, powers, rulers of darkness in the heavenly places, as Paul puts it, are gaining strength, which tells us what time it is.
Sure,
LA, because in the last days, the
perilous times will come.
Perilous times. The power of the Holy Spirit, I think, will be gradually lifted away until that final lifting away of the body of Christ. At which time, you talk about demonic.
Utter chaos will reign. Utter chaos will reign.
And I think your book kind of is dealing with that whole idea. I mean, you're pulling out example after example after example of destabilization that's going on right now.
And I think at some point, the reader or just the person on the street, if we begin to examine, if it was just lawlessness was manifesting, but it's not only lawlessness. I mean, like when we just go, it's wars and rumors of wars. It's basically the checklist, the punch list that Jesus warns will herald his coming, will precede his coming, which will lead to the tribulation. I think we're in that window of time. I really do.
Take a moment and just remind you that you're watching prophecywatchers.com, and right here on this website we have a little tab that you can click, go to our online bookstore, and you will find the Days of Chaos package there. That is LA's book called Days of Chaos, accompanied by LA's latest DVD, Watchers 9, and it also is entitled Days of Chaos, an hour and I believe 50 minutes of intense video describing, I think, the phenomenon, explaining it for Christians. And by the way, if you have friends who are puzzling about what's going on, this video is going to answer a lot of questions. We have these 2 items, Days of Chaos by itself, $19.95, but the package, which is a really good value, includes this DVD and a bonus book by Chuck Missler. And this is all about biblical numerics of every stripe. I mean, if you've ever heard Chuck Missler speak,
incredible.
It is incredible. And this little book we're going to toss in to this package. So the Days of Chaos package, yours for $39.95, all 3 items. And believe me, it'll help you to understand what's going on today. It'll help you to carry the message of the gospel to your friends in our society at this particular time. Where should we go from here in our discussion? My head is kind of spinning, but with all the news. Of course, at this very same time, we have an invasion of the Middle East by none other than, as you call him, Tsar Vladimir. Tsar Vladimir the First, Putin, and his jet plane orchestra.
There it is.
I mean, it's there. They're flying in. It's of biblical proportions, as far as I'm concerned. You have the force from the north, you have Persia, you have the forces from northeast Africa, Ethiopia, Libya, all of the participants as listed in the Bible are warming up and beginning the big fight, and we're all just standing around and saying, wow, what now?
And to me, it's amazing because there's 7 billion people on the planet, and how many people even know this passage, Ezekiel 38? How many Christians out of the 1.8 billion Christians on the planet are even aware of the prophetic implications of what is forming in the Middle East right now, which is alarming? All of a sudden, Tsar Vladimir decides to show up with planes, tanks, over perhaps 150,000 troops at some point. They've parked the largest nuclear submarine on the planet, off the coast of Syria.
Yes.
They've given 75 tanks to Hezbollah. I mean, the ante is way up here, way up.
Way up. And by the way, on the subject of those nuclear submarines, they carry multiple individually targeted nuclear warheads, so that 10 missiles might have 20 warheads,
That's right.
each of which
one goes to a different place.
can go to a different place.
Yeah,
in other words, you have a push-button nuclear war. There it is. And here we are at a particular time in history that I think God talks about. He speaks of, Jesus spoke of wars and rumors of wars. If we're not living in that kind of a time right now, I don't.
You rest your case. Exactly.
So, well, we could go on.
Sure we could.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. And let's close on an encouraging note.
Okay.
And I'll let you begin. What would you say to encourage Christians out there?
I think that people need to understand, especially Christians, we have the answers in our book. And the Bible tells us very specifically, the words of Jesus warns us what will precede his coming. And all we need to do is understand that while the words might seem or may create fear in a person, the bottom line is this: he's warning us exactly of the things that will precede his coming. We should look at what's going on and understand that, oh my gosh, prophecy is being fulfilled right under my nose. It should light a fire in us to get out and tell people the good news, that there's an answer to the depression, to the drug use, to the sin in some people's lives. There's an answer to what's going on in the world, and his name is Yeshua or Jesus. Yeah. That's the answer to this, all the insanity, all the lawlessness, all the craziness that we see.
And from my perspective, I think prophecy, that is the prospect of fulfilled prophecy, being imminent as it is right now, is a great evangelical tool. It's one of the best ways to go to your neighbor and say, have you read the papers? The Bible talks about these things.
That's right.
You should read the Bible. And it's a great way to remind people that Jesus is coming soon.
Amen.
And it's a great motivator. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to L.A. Marzulli. By the way, I should mention the Days of Chaos package that we talked of a bit earlier, but will become available on the 12th of October. You'll see that date when you go to our online bookstore. But I do hope you order the package, because L.A.'s always got a lot to say about what's going on right now. L.A., we'll just have to talk again soon.
Can't wait, Gary. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
I'm Gary Stearman. Keep watching, everybody. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.